There we go. And we're live. Oh, I've chopped the top of my head off. There we are. Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased that so many people can join us, but I'm guessing that, it's Friday night. It's actually a bit chilly today in the studio, but we are ready to kind of collate everything we've been doing so far this week. And I'm going to do a little bit of a demo. But first and foremost, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for everyone who's been part of the Makers Reset community this week. We've had so many comments by email and in the group explaining that it's been really good just to reevaluate, look at things a little bit differently. And thank you so much to all of you who've been sharing photos of your stashes, be they organised or not yet organised, but a work in progress. So well done to all of you. And I also wanted to sort of shout out to those of you that have been really active. So thank you. And I think, Elizabeth, you're here right now. Hi, Elizabeth. You were on my list of people to say thank you for being part of the group and managing to get on all of the lives as well. Thank you to Dashini, who I know emailed me too, and Janice and Karen and Nikki too, and Sally. So, and of course, all the rest of you as well. We just picked out some of the names that have been the most chatty. So huge thank you for joining us. It's been loads and loads of fun. So let's start to put these two elements together to create something. So you may have picked up over the last few days that my favourite way of expressing myself when it comes to textile art is fabric collage. You've seen behind me the mess, and I've shown you a little bit on how I can use the colour wheel to help me organise the stash, but it's not always easy to pick colours out. But once you have kind of separated things out and got things in some sort of order, it makes the creative process so much easier. So over the last 2 days, I've just been playing around with those fabric scraps and starting to put together a couple of collages based around this inspiration photo. So I'm going to remind you of what my inspiration photo was. So here it is here. And I've just been playing around with it and picking out some fabrics that I thought suited that particular image. I actually had 2 different goes at it. So the first time the palette was a little bit brighter. In fact, I started with the fabrics that I sorted the other evening on Tuesday and started with those and then moved on. And then this morning I pulled some different fabrics out, and actually I think I got a slightly more muted palette the second time. So if I just show you some of those, so we have sort of a nice grey there, which was for the path. I found, now this is disappointing, I found a couple of greens which I thought worked really well, but one of them if I had my time over again, I would stabilise because one of them was particularly flimsy. The colours are fantastic on it, really autumnal, but it's a viscose, so it's really floppy. And if I am going to do anything with that in my textile art, I will be putting some stabiliser behind it, probably some iron-on stabiliser. And then on the oranges, yellows and kind of reds, the reds really aren't that red, are they, in that picture? So I then pulled out some other colours for the autumnal trees. So I was reasonably happy with that palette that I pulled out this morning. And so I made a start because I figured that you guys probably don't want to spend as long as it takes to cut out every little piece. And I actually found that having sorted out my stash and prepared a little bit, it meant that actually the putting things together and creating the bare bones of the fabric collage actually only took me about an hour for the first one. And as I've gone through, I've kind of changed my mind in a little bit. Obviously, this image has got lots and lots and lots of tiny pieces. So what I think will work best for this particular one is just to block out some base colours and then add to it with either stitch or smaller pieces of fabric later. So I'm going to go back to the image and show you what I've been up to. So make sure it's under the camera in the right place. So there's the image. And then this afternoon, what I've done is I've kind of more roughly cut the image. Now, if you remember from Monday, we did a couple of different ways of copying the image, one of which was onto tracing paper. So that was a case of squiggling the lines, which you can barely see there, but then you can see the blocks of colour. So I've had a play around with that, but realised that actually, particularly as it is quite complicated, I decided to simplify the lines even more. So what I was working on this afternoon, later this afternoon, was to just simplify it down even more so that we've just got some colour blocks. I got a little bit carried away on the computerized sewing machine as well, so I've started to put some autumnal leaves here which are standing out rather well, and these are just standard leaf designs on the sewing machine. So I've just caught sight of your comment. You're absolutely right, Dawn. Getting organised does make a huge amount of mess. So basic shapes here, and then what I thought I'd do was I'd use yet another method to add in, because I was finding the trees were particularly tricky because they are basically branches and some trunks up this side, just in this area here and up here. I also had a copy of this image, which an app turned into a line drawing for me. And I thought actually that's going to be a lot easier to cut out my trees using this image instead. So I don't know if you remember, but I did actually print out a couple of copies of that. So what I'll do is, if you'll bear with me, I will get to it and actually show you how I go about cutting out these bits and pieces. I know it doesn't sound particularly complicated. That's because it isn't. So if I just move this out of the way, what I've chosen for the trunks is this lovely dark brown corduroy, which has got quite a lot of texture and picks up every single piece of fluff, as you can see there. And then I've used another copy of that image to create the template. So we've got a little chunk of tree trunks here. I'm just using one of my, just a normal pin, just a normal sewing pin, just to pin the template on. Now this one's going to be tricky, isn't it? There it is. If I just tweak it round a little bit, because I don't mind if my the wales on the cord aren't actually up and down. I think it makes it a little bit more tree-like if it's a little bit more random. So I'm just going to use these scissors are by Prim, and they are slightly serrated and they just amazingly sharp. So it means I can trim round quite quickly. There we go. In. And I think for what I was doing earlier, I think this is going to give us a little bit more accuracy. So I tend to, when I'm doing these sort of fabric collages, I do tend to add and add and add and add to, and sometimes until the point where I can't put a needle or a pin through them. So I am trying very, very hard to plan ahead and actually have a think about what I want to do. You do, obviously, you are building up layers. It's a little bit like painting in that regard. So you can build up the layers as you go. One of the fabrics that I found in the stash, which I've used for the slightly reddy leaves in the image that we're working on this evening, It was actually part of must have been a ball dress, because it was some silky fabric and it's been underlined with a red net. So it must have been to give the garment a bit of body. But actually it works really well, because it gives the fabric a little bit of extra, sort of body, and also more texture for us for this purpose. We want things to kind of look not quite three-dimensional, but a little bit more lifelike. Now you'll notice I'm not sticking to these absolutely to the letter, but there we go. Oh, might have chopped off a limb. The poor tree. No, I need to come at that the other way. Right, almost. Right, okay. So there we have, hopefully, the pieces that I'm looking for. Now, I tend to find that when I'm working on something like this, when I've got these smaller pieces, I tend to find that actually pinning can be quite frustrating, because I would prefer things not to wiggle around quite so much. So my top tip for this scenario is actually, rather than to pin, to use glue instead. So you can use a fabric glue, or I often get away quite reasonably with doing Pritt stick. Actually works quite well, but today, because I'm being a posh lady, I am actually going to use some proper, I've buried a pin, so I'm just going to take that pin out from underneath. So I'm actually going to use some fabric glue. So it's this piece here actually that I was just talking about. It's actually got some red netting over the top, which means that it just gives it a little bit of extra texture. So where's my lovely glue? Right, so here we go. So this is a water-based glue. You can see it's covered in little bits of fibre, but it means that it's designed for sticking fabrics down, and it doesn't gum up your needle when you come to then stitch it later. So that will just hold everything in place. You'll notice I have stitched down some of these pieces here. So I was just building up some texture really. So I've used either fancy stitches like with the leaves, or I've used a zigzag. So this looks really gooey, but actually it works terribly well. There we go. And a little bit more on the trunk here. There we are. So that means that it just holds everything in place until I want to then use probably machine stitching. I might hand stitch into this as well actually. So that goes kind of around about there. There we go. So if I take those two little templates off, and yeah, so that's the tree's trunks done. I'm also going to add a little bit more in terms of texture when it comes to the tree line as well. Coincidentally, the sky and the river in the image are fairly similar, so I've picked out a kind of grey colour as a background, but that's the sort of area that I'd probably work into in stitch more. So yeah, so that's that bit. So one more bit to show you as part of the demonstration. So I've just picked out sort of, let me just change back over so you can see what I'm working on. So it's over in this region here. So if I put that part down, it's those couple of trees there. So in the image, they are yellowy greeny colours. So I've picked out that, and I will pick out a green as well. So if I do the yellowy bit first, and then actually I'll do it the other way around. I think it's because it's now I'm working in artificial light. This afternoon I was working in obviously daylight, so it feels different. Anyway, top tip, obviously we all know, because we're all crafters, we do not cut our paper with our fabric scissors. So here I have just a pair of cheap and cheerful paper scissors. And in this studio, anything that's used for paper has got a little red tie on the handle, just so we don't get confused. So I was going to do, so the bigger one is going to be in the greeny colour. So I'm just going to pin that down and then just snip round it as I did for the tree trunk. So questions for all of you. Have any of you had a go at doing this kind of fabric collage type textile art in the past? Or is it not your thing? Would you prefer other forms of creative expression? There we go. So we'll have one, I think it goes about there, and then the other one. So this is a particularly shiny piece of fabric. I'm quite lucky that I've managed to pick up over the years pieces of fabric from other people's stashes, so I don't always know exactly where they've come from. I know that I acquired a lot from another person that, like me, enjoyed doing textile art, so she'd also hoarded, shall we say, lots of different fibres and fabrics. I managed to grab hold of some upholstery sort of sample books from a local interior design place when they were upgrading. So they had all the books just sitting out in the rain outside their shop. And it means that sometimes you get little swatches of a whole huge range of colours. So, and obviously you can take as long as you like to get these trimmed right up. There we go. And it's also useful to have somewhere to sweep all the bits into the bin. So that's going to sit around about there and be representative of these kind of trees here. So if I just whip the pins out, and then again, I always bury my things, some more of this super duper glue on the back of this piece. I know it looks really sticky, but it's actually remarkably, right, it needs to come just below that level. It's remarkably clean in terms of not upsetting the needle on the sewing machine, which is what I'm always worried about. I've found in the past that if you do end up with glue on your sewing machine needle, it acts as if the needle's gone blunt, so you'll start skipping stitches. So always worth making sure that your needle is clean. I have seen some needles branded as anti-glue, so I'm assuming they have some sort of coating on them. There we go. So there we have the bare bones of what could become these trees here. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea as to how I go about that part of the process. Let me just whiz back over, see me again. Wow, so let's have a look at some of these wonderful comments. Dawn! Well, there you go. I'm glad you've had a go at free motion. That's great. Dawn and I met a few months ago when I was doing a live for another fabric business, sewing business. So, that's fantastic. Excellent. I love the idea of you having a go, Fiona. That's great. I'm really pleased that people are going to try having a go. This would be awesome. Awesome. Fantastic. Excellent. Well, the thing is, I find that doing the collage is it's kind of a guilty pleasure, because sometimes when I'm making clothing and things, I'm like, oh, I can just hang on to that and then it might end up in a project somewhere. So, and I quite like using fabrics that have got some sort of memory to them. I have a seascape downstairs in the studio, and it actually even contains parts of old bikinis, of all things. So, Yeah, so applique, yeah, absolutely. You can. This is a form of applique, bizarrely. So yes, it's I would call this raw edge applique, and it's a simple form of applique. But you can use a more structured form of applique if you like, whilst you're interpreting images like this. So fantastic.
What's the background fabrics on the
Oh right, okay. So the background fabric, I'm just got a piece of sheeting behind here. So this square at the back, and I do try really hard to make sure I've got a nice big square of sheeting or calico or something in the back, because then once you've finished, if you're happy with the image and you want to use it in another form, if you want to make it into a cushion or if you want to frame it, it means you've got a little bit extra to then put into seams or stretch around a frame. So I tend to use sheeting because I've got plenty of it around. So I've just got, in fact, there's a couple of bits of sheeting, and then it's just different bits of fabric so this in the back here is just some white sheeting. And these are all different coloured bits out of the stash. So when I was demonstrating on Monday, I copied one of the images I copied onto bondaweb. So, and I think I mentioned at the time that if we were to do a bondaweb version, it would end up a mirror image. And this is exactly what I did. So the advantages of bondaweb are that you can cut out some of these smaller pieces exactly on target, but because you're tracing through and then you're sticking it on the other side, it flips the image. So you can see here that my path is going up the other side and the tree is on the other side. But I did pop this together with bondaweb. As I said, this colour scheme is a little bit brighter. This is one I did a couple of days ago. And I've used a technique, the fallen leaves around the edge here and giving a little bit of texture, is confetti. So that's where you slice up your fabrics into tiny little pieces and then stitch them down. So yes, obviously very much work in progress, but I've used free motion to just start building some texture here to put some ideas of tree branches and things in this area, and on we go. And then another one, just to give you another view of it. So this one was done using the, sorry, I'm lost for words again. Using the tracing paper, which I then cut into pieces and used them as templates for each of the different coloured regions. And that I've just tacked down using some stitches on the sewing machine, and that's really just a jumping off point to then do more stitching into it, possibly adding some more fabrics. So yes, so that gives you a bit of an idea as to as to what we're doing. Question there from Alison. Yes, we do stock the pens. They are also by Prim. So what I've done actually in tomorrow morning's wrap up email, I have got a little button, so anything that we've used during the process over the last few days that's not stash, I have put a link to. So I've put a little link to all the bits and pieces that we've used. So the next steps for me with these would be some hand stitching and then possibly some machine stitching using the programs, but also free motion. Now, Dawn and I have just had a little chat about this. Yes, I do love doing free motion, and I'm really glad that Dawn's been able to continue from the introduction we did a little while ago. And that's the big news, really, and that's kind of why you're all here, is to say that if you've enjoyed this process, if you've enjoyed crafting alongside me, I am launching an online tutorial and subscription to do free motion and collage, and it's called the Floral Free Motion Subscription Box. And it's going to be a system that means that we send out a little package of textile treasures, some little goodies in a little box, just every 2 months. So it's nothing too daunting. And then we will do a make together session. So I will demo and answer any questions and queries as we go live once every 2 months. And then again, so basically the idea is that we get together as a community once a month. One time will be the demonstration. And then the second time, so the following month, will be a chance to do questions and answers session, and also a chance for people to show off if they feel brave, or to come with any nasty snarl ups and questions and what's gone wrong kind of questions. So that's the idea. I will be emailing all of you about it in the next few days, and you might see it popping up all over my social media as well. So as a sneaky peek, if I just do a quick like that, there are some images that are the kind of thing that will be in the subscription box. So the idea is that we do a topical-ish flower for each one. So the first box will go out in mid-November, and then the idea is that we have the lives towards the end of each month. And as with this, if you can't make the actual session, they'll all be recorded in the portal. So that's the big plan. I'm really, really pleased to be able to announce it to you lovely people who have been part of the Makers Reset. And I hope you feel that you've been reset and that you're able to hunker down as the temperature starts to drop and get crafty again and feel a bit different about all of those resources that you've got around you. Just to say, if you discover that as you've done your sorting out that you'll be interested in joining us for the Free Motion course, but you don't think you really need all of the extra fabrics to be sent out, that's absolutely fine too. So we've got a PDF only version so that you get all of the instructions and the patterns and can join in with all the lives, but you don't get a little parcel through the post. So that's it for me. I just thank you again for being such a tremendous group of people. This little group here on Facebook will carry on for another couple of weeks. So please do, if you do get a chance to have a little try and have a bit of a session of chopping and sticking or sewing and seeing if you can put together a little picture based around your inspiration, that would be awesome to see. And if you manage to have made any connections with anyone locally to you, I'd love to hear about that too, because it's just really nice to connect with other crafters, because we are all just the best people. So thank you so much for having me live in your Facebook for a couple of times this week, and hopefully we will see you again really soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.